Thank you for listening to the Damage Report podcast, the show covering the true threats facing our country and what you can actually do about them. You can support this free podcast by leaving us a review and giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to be listening to it. Every review helps more people discover the show at no cost to you. This is the Damage Report. It is Monday. Buckle up, everybody. It's going to be a big one, especially when it comes to the future of the Supreme Court. So we're going to be talking for about 97% of this episode about Brett Kavanaugh. No, of course we have other things, but there has been so much that's developed over the course of the weekend, and then even this morning there is huge breaking news, and that is why it is awesome to have our show in the morning. We get it first, although you might have noticed that this is shooting 1 hour later. This is our new time slot, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I think I nailed that.
Yeah.
And look
hi,
who's
I'm
here.
Sorry.
By the way, she's here. Even
Yelling
though
in
it's
the background.
New time slot, same Brooke Thomas. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to be breaking down the news. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about, but then later on in the show, we're going to be joined by Lauren Duca, a freelance journalist. We're going to talk about the future of Roe v. Wade. She's been engaged in these traveling Rise for Roe protests. It's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about Tucker Carlson, maybe about Kavanaugh, all the big stories of the day. So why don't we just jump into it?
Let's do it. What's first?
Brett Kavanaugh's future on the Supreme Court seems a little bit shakier, which is a real shame this week as a result of all that's coming out from last week, where first we knew that there was this mysterious letter, then we heard it might have to do with sexual assault, then we got the details, and then the woman herself, Christine Blasey Ford, a professor at Palo Alto University, she has come out and talked about what actually happened. And I believe most directly as a result of that, we have had a ripple through all of the votes that were considered somewhat shaky on Kavanaugh, where now we might actually have a slight slowing down of the process. We might learn more about this woman's story. The attempts to destroy her credibility initially appear not to have worked, although that campaign continues. And so with that, I want to give a little bit more details directly from her as to what she says happened. This is her speaking with the Washington Post. She said, Kavanaugh physically pushed me into a bedroom as I was headed for a bathroom up a short stairwell from the living room. They locked the door and played loud music, precluding any successful attempt to yell for help. Kavanaugh was on top of me while laughing with Redacted, this second person that has not yet been named, although we do believe we know who it is, who periodically jumped onto Kavanaugh. They both laughed as Kavanaugh tried to disrobe me in their highly inebriated state. With Kavanaugh's hand over my mouth, I feared he may inadvertently kill me. From across the room, a very drunk Redacted said mixed words to Kavanaugh ranging from go for it to stop. It's a pretty big distinction between those two things. At one point, when Redacted jumped onto the bed, the weight on me was substantial. The pile toppled and the two scrapped with each other. After a few attempts to get away, I was able to take this opportune moment to get up and run across to a hallway bathroom. I locked the bathroom door behind me. Both loudly stumbled down the stairwell, at which point other persons at the house were talking with them. I exited the bathroom, ran outside of the house, and went home. And so that is what we know now about what is alleged to have happened. We also know a little bit more about when she first started talking about this. She says that she didn't talk about it for many, many years after it happening and did not see Kavanaugh again. Although back in 2012, in some sort of therapy session with her husband, she did talk about the incident and did name Kavanaugh at that point. So huge developments.
Huge development.
What do you think about all that was breaking over the course of this weekend?
Right, so one, yes, Kavanaugh's already said this didn't happen. He wouldn't do this. I feel like I have to just say that. Also, what has been not fascinating, but I think harmful to me is that she was forced to come forward. She kind of, she came forward over the weekend, but she was forced to. And what she kind of talks about leading up to her basically being like, you know what, I may as well, bothers me. It bothers me that a reporter followed her to her home. It bothers me that a reporter was calling her coworkers because I feel like there should be a line. I've been there many of times, even as a local news reporter, knocking on doors of a murder victim's family, and it's uncomfortable and it's awful, and you wish you didn't have to do it. But there has to be a line, and I feel like showing up to the home of a woman who is allegedly a victim of sexual assault as a teenager, I feel like that crosses that line.
Yeah.
And thankfully, she came forward, but she didn't have to.
Yeah, and didn't want to initially at all.
Didn't want to, and that's her prerogative. And I'm bothered by that.
Yeah, and then, so the troubling thing is, so the initial information comes out. This is before we knew the details of her name, her story, and all of that. We knew a little bit about the story, sort of secondhand through Ronan Farrow. Then the GOP begins spinning up their combination attempt to shred her credibility, playing on the fact that she hadn't put her name forward. Well, she hasn't put her name forward, then how can we take it seriously? The opposite side of that game is as soon as she comes forward, they will then use any detail about her life to attempt to tell you that we shouldn't take it seriously.
Well, one could say that we have a precedent that it wouldn't be taken seriously because
they never take it seriously.
And we've had this exact same incident, almost a different situation, but a similar scenario. It's sexual harassment, not sexual assault necessarily, but we've seen it. And the accuser is sitting on the Supreme Court and will be for, until he doesn't want to.
That's true, yes. In similar situation with the White House.
Right.
Yeah, and then every part of this is so disingenuous. Them saying, well, why did she wait until right before the vote? Well, she didn't. She sent the letter back in July. But then when that further detail comes out, they don't update their view and think, oh, well, in that case, it's reasonable. No, then it's just on to another thing. The thing here is some people want to have a serious conversation, and some people have an objective. Their objective is getting Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Everything else is just games being played around that. Considerations about whether this woman was actually sexually assaulted do not enter into it. There is no thought whatsoever about that. Eric Erickson's on Twitter talking about this being a Democrat conspiracy. The Daily Wire is saying, oh, we tracked down, because we know her name now, we tracked down, did you know that she had donated money to Friends of Bernie and one other Democratic group? And then some people will hear that and think, well, that's suspicious. First of all, it's not suspicious. Many people have donated to various groups.
It's fairly normal, yeah.
And what that guy didn't mention is the donations were between $5 and $30. Right. It could have literally been the $27 stereotypical donation to Bernie, but we're supposed to think that, oh, well, then she's basically George Soros at this point. It's just about it's just tribalism. It is just tribalism. We want this guy. We don't care about learning the details of this attack. We don't care if they actually happened. But I do want to give some other updates. We had that letter, the suspiciously quickly put together 65 women speaking in support of him. Well, now we have another letter saying, we believe Dr. Blasey Ford and are grateful that she came forward to tell her story. This is a draft letter from alumni of Holton Arms, a private girls' school in Bethesda. These are people who knew the two people involved in this story. They said it demands a thorough and independent investigation before the Senate can reasonably vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to a lifetime seat on the nation's highest court. They also say that what was said about Ford is all too consistent with stories we heard and lived while attending Holton. Many of us are survivors ourselves. So not necessarily saying that they had experiences like this with him, but they had heard about people doing things like this. Now,
this is not out of the ordinary. And since the beginning of this year, more and more people realize this is not, unfortunately, this is not out of the ordinary. So of course it is a believable story. Yeah. None of us were there, but when it comes to someone being confirmed to become, to a lifetime appointment, as essentially the highest decision maker when it comes to the laws of this land, absolutely, it needs to be heard. Yeah, in a number of ways more powerful than the president, and certainly with a longer term hold of power over the country. And look, this story by itself, this doesn't necessarily mean anything, but neither did the one that they came out before. The simple fact that you can find some women that he didn't sexually assault, what is that supposed to prove? It doesn't prove anything. But they believe that, because that's what always happens. Anyone who has ever been accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault is going to have some people that think that they're good people. Right. Okay, that's You're gonna
civilization's
have,
like.
Absolutely. People who have been convicted and admitted to murder have one or two people at least. I think what was fascinating about that, and it's so small, but I cannot name 65 boys that I went to high school with. It would take me a while. A lot of them are named Ryan. I remember that. But and I went to, I didn't go to an all-girls school, so it should be easier for me. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I get what they're trying to do. Look, if someone has been accused of something, you're going to want to stand up for them for the most part. That is simply what people do. But it has virtually nothing to do with whether or not they actually committed this act. Now, I just want to add one more wrinkle to this. And again, this doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it is interesting in terms of what we do know about Brett Kavanaugh and redacted from that time. There is a belief that the redacted person is Mark Judge. Now, both Kavanaugh and Judge have talked about their time in that period of their life. And Kavanaugh
Judge wrote a book, right?
Judge wrote a book, and we have a little excerpt from it. So Kavanaugh said in a 2014 speech to the Yale Federalist Society, an amusing story of a friend who got so drunk he fell and smashed a table. Mark Judge, in his yearbook, is treasurer of the Keg City Club, 100 kegs or bust. Now, neither of those things, again, saying that you're a hard drinker doesn't mean that you sexually assaulted anyone at all.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
But it plays in slightly to the story, and it also makes it, if you're saying, well, she didn't talk about this for years, her memory might be faulty. Okay, well, they were apparently hard binge drinkers at that time. Maybe their memory is a little bit faulty. We can all play these sorts of games.
Absolutely.
Now, we're gonna take a short break. When we come back, what is likely to happen in terms of the people with the real power in the Senate after this? Welcome back to the Damage Report, everybody. We're breaking down the latest on the Brett Kavanaugh story. We're going to move on to the senators in just a second, but there was one other thing I wanted to mention in terms of background on these two individuals, Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge, who again is being alleged to have been the redacted accomplice. I'm not actually sure at this point, perhaps Brooke, you know, what the evidence is that this is the individual, but everyone seems to be narrowing this down as the person.
Yeah, I read a Washington Post article, the one where they got her statement and everything.
Yeah.
I am like, maybe I'm misremembering. This always happens in here. I'm always like coming here very sure that I'm like, wait, I don't know. If you don't know, I don't know.
Interesting.
But
okay, well,
that's where the way that I took away from the story was that the way she was able to get away in her story was that Judge jumped on top of them for a second time.
Yeah.
And she was able to slither away.
Yeah. Well, just in case, this is what we believe to be the case. It could turn out that it was not him, but people seem to believe it was. There was one other thing from his yearbook that I thought was interesting. He, in your yearbook, you'll put the groups you're involved in, then you also have a couple of quotes or something, usually like an emo song lyric or something like that. Well, he's got a quote from Sir Noel Coward that says, "Certain women should be struck regularly like gongs," which is an odd thing to put in your yearbook, even in the 80s, and might play into the attitude of these people towards women in terms of what you can do to them. Because again, there was a physical as well as sexual assault there. Again, we don't know for sure. These are allegations. I just want you to have all the information necessary. Now let's move on to what could actually happen. There are a number of votes that are going to be really significant in terms of the future of Brett Kavanaugh. The two that are talked about the most are Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, but there are others too, both on the Republican and on the Democratic side. And so what do they think about all this? Well, Jeff Flake, senator, said if they push forward without any attempt with hearing what she's had to say, talking about Christine Blasey Ford, I'm not comfortable voting yes. We need to hear from her, and I don't think I'm alone in this. So this is responding to the initial statement from Chuck Grassley that the vote was going to take place on the same exact schedule, sexual assault allegations be damned. Bob Corker said, I think that would be best, delaying the vote for all involved, including the nominee. If she does want to be heard, she should do so promptly. So there are two potential votes that are indicating that it should be delayed, and at least in the case of Flake saying that they might vote against him if it is not. Now you also have Susan Collins saying that Professor Ford and Judge Kavanaugh should both testify under oath before the Judiciary Committee. Not necessarily saying that it has to be delayed if they don't, but saying that this needs to happen and not just in a phone call.
Right. And even specifically earlier this weekend, she said she wasn't sure. She was asked directly, do you believe her? And was saying that she wasn't comfortable giving that answer yet. And it's fascinating because it was a complete different response and reaction from her than we got when discussing the picture of Al Franken. Mm-hmm. Which everyone should have been against because it was a gross picture and it was disgusting.
Well, actually, if we could back up one graphic, to do your point, we have a tweet from Lisa Murkowski at the time, back then, saying we're seeing a culture of harassment and assault being exposed on a daily basis. Whether you're in the media, politics, or anywhere else, abuse of power is unacceptable and shouldn't be tolerated at any place at any level. Senator Franken must know that, and that's why he must step down. So there was a very clear standard for a senator, which I'm not exactly sure where Murkowski is going to come out on this. Now that there are so many others saying that the vote should be delayed or that we need to have this testimony first, it seems if Lisa Murkowski does not sign on to that, it seems even more suspicious because there's less cost politically to doing it if so many others are having the courage to actually come forward and defy their party in saying this. Now, in terms of the White House, obviously, they put him forward. It is possible that they did not know about these allegations, I guess. But what are they going to make of this new information? A White House lawyer said, in terms of delaying it or pulling his nomination, no way, not even a hint of it. If anything, it's the opposite. If somebody can be brought down by accusations like this, then you, me, every man certainly should be worried. We can all be accused of something.
I just want to stop right there because this happens a lot when there is an accusation. The conversation becomes bigger about it being just an accusation, and it kind of implies that women are just lying, that it's just false. No one is brought down by accusations. There are investigations oftentimes that prove fault and truth. So that's what the issue is. They're not being brought down by accusations. If you are guilty of sexual assault, you should be brought down. And I think it bothers me and a lot of people. It should bother everyone that we focus on this idea of just a fake made-up accusation.
Yeah, and
the question is, should it be heard? Yes.
But and the thing is, in that quote, as in so many others, there's no interest in whether or not it's true. They don't even pretend that they care about the actual truth of what happened that day. And just as a larger point, almost nobody's been brought down. Basically, nobody's in jail. Even the ones who had the worst accusations of literal breaking down doors to rape women are not in jail. Okay, a show or two has been pulled. House of Cards has a new lead. That's about it after a year and a half of this. This idea that like thousands of men are being marched to concentration camps because of an accusation from some anonymous person is simply not true. It is a ridiculous attempt to distract from very real concerns that for decades and now these accusations are not taken seriously.
Right, people lose a little bit of money. You're right. I shouldn't have said that. Right, brought down. People lose a little bit of money.
No, I'm not saying you're wrong. But
I did use those words too, and you're right. And then you also have the whole time other people standing up for them and saying they should be forgiven. They should get their shows back. They should get this back. So.
Yeah. And by the way, so two other things about the White House statement. The quote was, accusations like this, then you, me, every man certainly should be worried. It is so like women are coming after us. You're a man, I'm a man. Everybody listening to this is probably a man. We should be worried because they're coming, okay? The women are coming, don't listen to the women. Not like, hey, we're all men and women in politics together. We should take this seriously. It's very us versus them. But here's the thing, can we be surprised about this? If they take Christine Blasey Ford seriously, there's a couple of other dozen women that have to be taken seriously that have accused someone closer to the White House than Brett Kavanaugh, and they do not want to set that precedent, obviously. So look, we'll see. We're going to talk a little bit later on with Lauren Duca about this, her expectations for what's going to happen with Brett Kavanaugh's nomination and the future of Roe if he does make it onto the court. But things are developing fast. It is possible. I mean, look, by the end of today, we could find out that the vote is definitely still going to take place at the same time, or Brett Kavanaugh could theoretically be pulled. It's probably not going to happen, but it's not impossible at this point. Okay, let's move on to the border. An absolutely devastating situation. A long-serving border agent, a Border Patrol supervisor, is now being held on $2.5 million bond after the belief that he has killed multiple people down at the border by shooting them in the head. An absolutely disgusting situation that thankfully we find out about because one of the people, a potential victim, actually escaped. Erica Pena apparently went willingly with this individual. And then while she was with him, things started to get dangerous for her. And she tried to escape from him at a gas station and ran into a trooper that she told the story about. And so this is the district attorney talking about the situation, saying, in our opinion, he is the sole person responsible for this horrific serial killing spree that has killed at least 4 people. I believe that that's the number that seems accurate at this point. So the individual, I always feel uncomfortable saying their names. So I'll just say the accused serial killer apparently grabbed her shirt to prevent her from exiting his vehicle. She began to scream for help and had to pull off her shirt to be able to escape and run away from the vehicle. And we have some details about the individuals who were killed. It is believed that they've all been shot in the head, generally either shot on a roadside or left on a roadside. So just a disgusting situation from somebody who'd been given power and authority in that region.
And this is the 3rd or 4th Border Patrol agent arrested for serious, heinous crime in this same area recently. And then I think Border Patrol is not answering questions as of right now about hiring standards and practices and what's going on and how this happens. And I mean, I think people want to know.
Yeah, there were other killings that have happened so far this year. And look, the thing is, if you have this many people in your employ, some of them might turn out to be terrible people. That's certainly true.
Sure.
But this is not even a part of the conversation. So when we talk about undocumented immigrants, Donald Trump wants us to talk about MS-13 somehow, as if those things are intimately related, and the crime implicit in these immigrants. But is there any discussion of the crimes that they face, the abuse before and after crossing the border, the violence against them when they do cross over? It's unfortunately not a part of the story all too often. Okay, we're gonna take our second break. When we come back, one of the most high-profile Senate races of this year, that is Beto O'Rourke versus Ted Cruz, a couple new wrinkles to it. Things are developing fast. We'll break those down on the other side. Back, everyone. Okay, so obviously there's the hurricane situation, pretty big news, and various people covering it in different ways. You happen to notice one particular spin on what was going on around the hurricane.
Yeah, there was a video that went viral this week. I don't know, it's created another hashtag on Twitter, but it's a video of a reporter in North Carolina chasing down a group of people coming, it looks like back and forth between a housing project across the street from a dollar store. The doors have been removed and people are running in and out with juice, bottled water, paper towels, things like that. And the issue has been the reporter and how she behaved in the incident. And this is a situation that we've talked about a lot and we've learned from since Hurricane Katrina and the racial implications of how we report on hurricane survivors and who's called a looter and who's called a thief and who's called taking and surviving. And the way this was handled, I think the reporter's getting a lot of criticism, but then she's getting a lot of support as well. She essentially in the video, if I can just describe the video, she is chasing down people coming in and out of this shut down, flooded dollar store and asking them, not asking them questions, but telling them, pointing the microphone in their face and saying, do you know you're looting? Do you know you're stealing? And going back and forth and kind of reporting about that. And you could hear her earpiece is not connected, so you can hear the phone is on speaker. And someone, what it appears back from the station, is telling her to not play police officer.
So tell her to stop doing what she's doing.
Right.
What do you know?
Well, because it's number one, it's not a safe situation, I think, for anyone. And I wonder, a lot of the questions is, how does this advance the story? And what are the problems with this? And are there better questions to ask when someone is coming in and out of a store? You see children with bottles of water in their hands and ramen noodles and paper towels. Is the issue, and also we don't know that our reporters are supposed to ask questions and tell the story, and we don't know whether someone laid their last $10 on there. We don't know if a lot of these people, obviously they are still there in an area that you were supposed to leave for your own safety. And so there are so many questions. Why are you still here? Are you out of food? Are you out of drinkable water? Are you okay? What's going on? Are you paying for this? Why are you doing this? And also, a report came in after her piece from the local police department that said that they are not responding because the manager of the dollar store has asked them to stand down. And it was just like a simple, I think, 2-line statement. But the video is getting a lot of attention.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we talked about the initial warnings to evacuate, we talked about the 2 different types of people who stay.
Right.
Those who just want to weather it and those who don't have the economic ability to leave. That's a story. The exact questions you asked, you could put those to the people who are in that area or worried about the strike of the hurricane and ask, could you leave if you wanted to? What effect on your finances would it have if you had to stay in a hotel for 4 or 5 days? Could you even do that? We know that many people could not. And if you're specifically going outside of a housing project, maybe issues of class and those sorts of things should be a little bit more in your mind rather than just getting footage of people looting. And you ask a person who's leaving a store that you think is looted, do you know that you're looting? Like he's gonna say, you raise really interesting philosophical questions about the law in times of emergency. Let me put this down. It's absolutely ridiculous. We know that there's a racial angle, whether this reporter refuses to admit that or not.
And I think she tweeted and got a lot of flack. And again, like I said, a lot of support, but she tweeted later after the story that her story had led to 5 arrests, and she started her statement with "so scary." And then the question is, what is scary? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a valid question. If a reporter says this was a scary situation, people appeared to be taking paper towels and juice and water and ramen noodles and food out of a dollar store. Mm-hmm. What is scary?
The scary thing is the threat of the hurricane, but I'm not sure that that's what she means.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know for sure. We don't know.
It's not a story that I think people are going to be talking about it for a while. Mm-hmm. It's been going in both directions.
You see it every time. You see a story like that about looting every time. Mm-hmm. You see the same photo of a shark on a highway every time. And then now you also see the same photo of Anderson Cooper chest deep in water being attributed to every hurricane as if that's CNN's coverage of the hurricane. There was a HUD official who said that this is proof that CNN is lying because she put photos of him, Hurricane Ike I think it was, next to a photo of someone on a non-wet ground in in this one, in Florence, and said, this is proof of CNN is fake news. You're fake news. You just lied. Anyway, listen, we don't learn.
This is not me saying I think stealing is okay. This is me saying I totally understand what it looks like, but there are questions that should be asked. And as a reporter, I think there are responsible questions. And these are not people taking flat screens and laptops out of Best Buy, out of a busted down Best Buy. These are a lot of children taking juice and water and noodles and paper towels. And there are questions why. And again, we don't know if someone left, their last cash on the, we don't know. We don't know why the manager of the store said stand down. We don't know any of this.
Yeah, and also you see this sort of coverage. So after a hurricane, you will see the poor person rushing in to get paper towels. But how often do you see a person going into the office of a CEO of a company that's moved into an area that's just experienced a hurricane to buy up things, to take control of power generation and things like that? Disaster capitalism. We're going to be talking with Naomi Klein a little bit later on this week. That sort of story, not so common. Do you know that you're looting? Do you know that you're stealing? They don't usually ask that of CEOs.
And listen, we have to be responsible. We saw what happened, and a lot of members of the media had to, change the way they reported on people after hurricanes. We saw pictures, plenty of pictures from Hurricane Katrina, and oftentimes when it was a black person with a bag in their hand, they were looting or stealing. And if it was a person who was not a person of color, it would be they were taking.
They were surviving.
Yeah. And people have to be treated fairly, and we have to be honest about how we report on people of color.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Texas Senate race. So Beto O'Rourke is down just a couple of points in a number of different polls that have come out in his race against Ted Cruz, coming up in less than 2 months now. And as further evidence that things are close, one of the tests there always will be is, will there be debates? And we now know there will be 3 debates between Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz 3 times before November. So we can expect that it won't be too long before those start. They'll be broken down into different sorts of policy for each debate. But this certainly is an admission that Ted Cruz is at least a little bit worried. We also know that he's very confident about his abilities as a debater. I had an argument with my girlfriend about that. I personally think that he comes across as a overly slick, oily weenie when he's in a debate, but she doesn't agree. So it could be that these debates could actually help him. I haven't seen Beto O'Rourke in the context of a debate.
Right.
Maybe that's not his strong suit. Do you think that this is an admission of things being close? Do you think that Beto O'Rourke could potentially use, this is going to be a televised thing. It could be a sort of Nixon Kennedy sort of situation in terms of the contrast between the two.
Right, I don't know, because we haven't seen Beto O'Rourke debate. We haven't, at least I haven't.
We've seen some videos of him speaking, and he comports himself well.
But I want to see this. I want to see this, and I'm fascinated that Ted Cruz has agreed to 3.
Yeah. That's more than you normally get.
Yeah.
Now, we do have, interesting, it's not really a debate, but it is a response to, we talked weeks ago about his video in support of those kneeling in the NFL. And a Texas city has struck back. This is the Reno City Council that passed a resolution saying the city council has declared that it is disrespectful towards and dishonors the sacrifice of our veterans, service members, and first responders, blah, blah, blah. Stand, recognize, blah, 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 honor the sacrifice. They said specifically that Beto O'Rourke's comments are false. I mean, he stated his opinion. I don't know exactly how you say that those are false.
They were
but that is now official.
With him saying there's nothing more American.
Nope, it's false.
Right, that's
not true. If you're within the city limits, it is a verifiable non-fact. So look, Texas has been so. One of the reasons that Beto O'Rourke's video went as viral as it did is because almost everyone speaking about this issue has been so clearly biased against the players, just viscerally opposed to any sort of quest for justice when it comes to criminal justice.
Yeah, and
this is a part of that.
When the mayor of the city, this town, Eric Hunter, was asked about the negative reaction that got into this move, I think that it was fascinating that he said that's probably from people who have missed the point of what we are saying. And I think just that sentence, one could say that their reaction to people kneeling is them missing the point to what the players are trying to say.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I mean, we've looked at all the facts, and this Reno City Council statement is false. Okay, you're wrong.
And I just don't think our city council, our government should be taking stands and wasting taxpayer money at meetings on whether or not somebody was disrespectful.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not a thing, guys. It's not like
cities can stand in solidarity with a community. I mean, that's a thing that happens. But this seems a little bit in the weeds, and obviously they're trying to show support for Ted Cruz. Well, okay, we'll see in a couple of months how that works out for you.
And you cannot have both. You cannot say you stand for people being able to use their First Amendment rights and then also say, but I don't. You can't have both. And a lot of times people are trying to have both. You can't have both.
I agree.
You either feel like these people don't deserve all of their rights, or they do. Can't have both.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll see. We're gonna have 3 debates now. Okay, we are gonna take another break, but when we come back, Lauren Duca, journalist, is gonna be joining us. We're gonna be talking now about Brett Kavanaugh, the future of Roe v. Wade, and more after this. Joining us now to help break down the situation with Brett Kavanaugh, potentially the future of his nomination, one of those fighting perhaps the most strongly against his nomination, Lauren Duca, freelance journalist, joins us on the Damage Report now.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you here. I'm sure you've been following, a ton has come out, even just this morning, about his nomination, what might happen with the testimony of Ford, and whether there will be a vote. In your view, since you've been following this so closely, what do you think should happen with his nomination?
It's hard because I thought these hearings should be delayed several days ago. Now that we have yet another development, I mean, to me, the hardest thing for senators taking a stand on whether these hearings should even continue is picking the reason why. You know, do they go with perjury? Do they go with sexual assault allegations? Do they go with the attack on Roe when they Susan Collins are allegedly pro-choice representatives? In the context of these allegations, though, and this moment, and how we're making sense of how we treat each other and what it means to rule over women's bodies, this is something we deserve information on, where it's not just I'm impossibly frustrated by how it's framed as, what are the ramifications for something that you did in high school, which is totally absurd on a variety of levels. One being that not all men are rapists, right? I'm fairly certain of that. And two, I think that what Brett Kavanaugh feels about how you should face ramifications for decisions you made as a minor is something we can look to his decision on the immigrant minor Jane Doe, who was seeking an abortion at 17 years old, and he tried to rule to stop that. So if that's something she was going to have to live with, I think that this is something we can investigate. And furthermore, this is not just about what the punishment is for men or for something at a pool party or high school, and the way those things are trivializing the situation is just gross, but this man is going to rule on the fate of women's bodies, and the way he treated this one woman's body allegedly is absolutely a factor in that, and more than enough reason to stop these hearings immediately.
Yeah, as you alluded to, there have been, it's sort of underlying a lot of the commentary from the right, but a few have been very explicit that, well, come on, in high school, everybody gets up to certain things, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I just thought, maybe I went to a different high school than these people. It wasn't just, hey, remember that sexual assault last weekend? That was a hoot. But they seem to believe that that is the standard experience for men. And in light of how the entire right and the media, the politicians have been responding to her allegations, we're not in the early days of the Me Too movement. We've had a little bit of time where society hopefully would have caught up a little bit. Do you believe that the GOP, the right in general, has moved at all as a result of this journey that society at large has been going on?
No, I mean, I think that they've really doubled down in terms of refusing to subscribe to decency. And that's what's really terrifying because, there have been sexual assault scandals on the left as well. And among leftist kind of pop culture heroes and leftist elected officials, those people have had to accept the consequences for their actions, where you have, on the right, President Trump is still president, and I don't even know, has Roy Moore conceded that race yet? Like, there's just an overall doubling down on deny and refuse. And I think the really frustrating thing right now is that you have to, subscribe to decency to be held accountable to it. And this feels to me like another battleground. This is a battleground about that will shape American life for decades, but it's also about what we're willing to accept from people in power in terms of the way they treat women. And I think we absolutely have to keep pushing. This is not something that we can just let slide through. And there are an uneven set of ramifications that have fallen out on this. But that's not the concern. The concern is pushing forward to a place where this kind of thing is not just a common item to be rehashed for all of these authority figures in our culture. I think we have to say no.
Oh, wow. Hashtag that. I'm totally fine with that. So look, the way that they've responded to her reminds me a lot, actually. You brought up Roy Moore, how they responded to those allegations. There's not even the veneer of, well, we are really concerned about this. It's serious. We just question the timing. It's obviously false. We're going to destroy this woman. And what I wonder is, so you spent a couple of weeks on the Rise Up for Roe tour, talking with educators and politicians, activists. In that time, did you have a chance to talk to any women who are sticking by the right? Even now that we've been through this so many times where the presumption is that women are lying, and even if they're being honest, it shouldn't matter, we shouldn't care. How do they stick with that movement, knowing that there's so little concern for the lived experiences of so many women?
I'm not sure. I also, though, would like to mention, the idea, there's this big idea of like, suddenly this has come up. Suddenly he is up for the highest court in the land and this has come up. That's why. That's why Christine Ford is putting her entire life on the line. She's already being torn apart. A private citizen is waiting to be just ripped to shreds. And what we're seeing too is the level that we go to vet and pick through and demolish every aspect of an accuser's humanity, while the accused is protected at all costs. That calculus is disgusting. And I think that, there's the idea that what accuser is there that has become really famous, that has had a bunch of opportunities? Where is that happening? I don't understand where that line of thinking comes from, but there are no opportunities. There is only pain and shame and more hurt. And I mean, I honestly thank you, Christine Ford. It's whether you believe her or not, this act comes at great risk to her. don't know how you justify any woman, any person, frankly, standing with the GOP at this point. I mean, the levels of hypocrisy and the total lack of cowardice, especially in regard to this confirmation hearing, it would take so little for any given Republican senator to be an American hero right now. And they're just saying, nope, I don't take bribes. I don't know. Like Susan Collins in particular is so frustrating. I think she's such a great example of she was very happy to be pro-choice when she thought that Roe was a settled issue that she wouldn't have to take a stand on. And now to call extreme people power and public pressure a bribe, those are your constituents. Yeah. To say that you're not listening to that is to say that you do not deserve, the people who you represent do not deserve your actual representation. And overall, we have a Senate GOP that is refusing to listen to public will and is attempting to shove this thing through unabashedly before the midterms. And given this information and doubling down on continuing to push for a vote, it's just becoming increasingly transparent. But that's what was going on, I think, all along.
I couldn't agree more. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a little bit more with Lauren. I know Brooke wants to ask you a couple of things. We'll be back in just a few. Welcome back to the Damage Report. We're on with freelance journalist Lauren Duca. Brooke?
Yeah, I do have a couple questions for you. Hi, Lauren. You wrote something that I thought it was a pretty powerful statement. Just a simple sentence: reproductive rights are essential to equality. And can you break that down for us?
Yes, I think that this has been something that is lost in a broader kind of popularization of progressivism that purports to be obsessed with financial justice and then finds a way to dismiss abortion access as a social issue, which I find absurd. I think the most basic argument and most concise way to put it is having a baby costs money. I think that, to break it down a little further, there are plenty of states right now where a wealthy woman is able to obtain an abortion, has maybe access to childcare to watch the child she already has, can take off from her job, has the resources to drive 200 miles, to stay in a hotel, to go and take on all of these obstacles that have been added by a total paucity of care. And that's the case in far too many states, whereas a woman of a different background is unable to, and this disproportionately affects women of color, this disproportionately affects poor women, and fundamentally is about who is able to make choices about their financial futures. So I don't think that we can talk about a progressive movement. Frankly, I don't think we can talk about building a truer, more equitable democracy without total, real access to reproductive rights.
And I have one more question. Unfortunately, we only have about one more minute for this. But John and I both saw an email you tweeted out yesterday. And I wondered, how do you separate yourself from negativity, almost abuse that you get on the internet and still are able to log on and do the work you do?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I struggle with deciding whether I should post those things, but the thing that I can't do is just stomach it, because it does affect me. It affects my energy. It affects my psyche, and my brain is my work. I'm a freelance journalist, and I have to come up with ideas. That is how I make my money. That is how I pay my rent, and all of that kind of hate, it affects me, and it makes it harder for me to do my job. So I try my best to compartmentalize it, to understand that it's an effort to dehumanize me. And I also lean into the positive. I think that something that is amazing is what my inbox looks like today. After I shared that, there are so many messages, actually over 100, of people saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know, here's some light. I care about you. I love your work. This is what your work has done for me. Here's a picture of my dog. Here's a Starbucks gift card. And I think that is so powerful, because at its core, what trolling is basically denying that I'm a human. It's forgetting that I'm a human and forgetting that I'm a person with a beating heart. And for people to go out of their way and say, hey, I see you. I know that whether I agree with you or not, that you are a human being, that to me is more powerful and totally keeps me going.
Yeah, those messages, and I've seen at other times you've posted them, absolutely horrendous. And obviously, I'm sure you know this, their hatred for you is derived from their fear of what you represent. They don't. If you were a terrible messenger for your positions, they would disregard you. They wouldn't care. But obviously, they're worried about you.
Chris Carlizza gets a lot of hate mail.
What's that?
I said I doubt Chris Kaliza gets much hate.
Oh man. Okay, man. I didn't think we'd get in one of those on the show, but thank you. Thank you for your advocacy on this issue. If people want to see more of your work, they should go to Teen Vogue, your column, Thigh High Politics, and they should definitely follow you on Twitter as well, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to have you on. Okay, that is unfortunately all the time we have. We only have a little bit more time. I did want to just briefly mention, we've been talking about this recently. We've gotten our podcast up and running recently. It's available on not only the TYT app, which is available at tyt.com/app, but also iTunes, Android, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Stitcher, all of those. Please subscribe to the podcast, and if you do, take a screenshot of you rating and reviewing it, send it to me, and I will send you an awesome GIF. I've had so much fun over the past couple of weeks in doing that.
No, it's really fun to watch, to like look at.
And you've been doing some of your own. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more. Thank you for listening to the Damage Report podcast, the show covering the true threats facing our country and what you can actually do about them. You can support this free podcast by leaving us a review and giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to be listening to it. Every review helps more people discover the show at no cost to you. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.